Battle in a minute. Genesis 47 and 47 again is wrapping up this story of Joseph and his brothers. They've come now to Egypt and they are standing before Pharaoh. And so Joseph introduces his father and his brothers to Pharaoh. And they have the conversation about, hey, what do you do? And they're like, we're shepherds. And he's like, ugh, okay, you can go to Goshen, right? But one rabbi, Rabbi Hirsch, says this. He says, this is a crucial test of Joseph's character. For the viceroy of Egypt to acknowledge as his own brothers these Canaanite shepherds who had given him every reason for repudiating them called for the highest loyalty and devotion. He did not abandon them. He did not punish them. Instead, he set them and their families up for success. And if that is not absolute forgiveness, man, I don't know what is. But Joseph not only forgave them, but then said, look, you weren't to blame. Like, you weren't the one who sent me to Egypt. God sent me to Egypt ahead of you to save your lives and to save the lives of your children and your children's children. And so he gave them, Pharaoh gave them the best land because they needed it for their flocks, the land of Goshen. And he was like, hey, Pharaoh was like, if any of you are particularly competent, put them in charge of my own livestock. And so he elevated their ability and notoriety in a good way to the people of Egypt. And then Jacob has this interesting interaction with Pharaoh. Pharaoh says, how old are you? And obviously Jacob is an old man. So Jacob says, the time of my stay on earth has been 130 years. They have been few and difficult, fewer than my ancestors lived. And we would think 130 years is not few, but his ancestors had lived longer than that. And he pointed out, they have not been hard years. They have not been easy years. Some of that was Jacob's own doing. He was conniving, he was manipulative, but then so was Laban, his father-in-law. And so he's had a tricky time. You know, he was running for his life from Esau, but that's because he cheated Esau out of the birthright and the blessing. So yes, it's been a difficult life. Some of it is pretty self-inflicted, though, if we're going to be honest. But then in verse 10, Jacob blesses Pharaoh and leaves his presence. Joseph had mentioned previously that God had made Joseph like a father to Pharaoh. And what does that indicate? Well, it infers that this Pharaoh was young, maybe a boy, maybe a teenager. And so God used Joseph and his wisdom and his age to be like a father to Pharaoh. I've got contemporaries, other chaplains that are my age, and I'm not like a father to them, I'm like a brother to them. But if I'm a father to someone, then it's someone that I'm pretty significantly older than, maybe 20 plus years, someone old enough to technically be their father, old enough to be their father, and impart that paternal wisdom to them. And so that indicates to me that Pharaoh was young. At whatever point of this story is in Pharaoh's life and in Joseph's life, Joseph is certainly, I would imagine, older by 20 plus years to Pharaoh. And so Jacob blesses Pharaoh. Like, that is such a wild moment. I wonder what he said to Pharaoh. This king of Egypt in this polytheistic country that worships all sorts of things, cats and hawks and dogs and all sorts of stuff. I mean, they're worshiping all these pagan deities, but for Jacob to pause and actually bless Pharaoh was pretty significant. In verse 26, Joseph made it a law for the country of Egypt, valid to this day, of course, to the day this book was written, that Pharaoh should receive 20%. So he was not getting the tithe, he was getting the fifth. He was getting even more than God required, or, God required. So anyway, then at the end of chapter 47, Jacob lived in the land of Egypt 17 years. This is verse 28. And so Jacob lived to be 147 years. So he was able to be in Egypt for 17 years with Joseph and Joseph's family. And then it starts to close the book on Jacob. At the end of chapter 47, Jacob is saying, hey, swear to me that you will carry me out of Egypt and bury me where my fathers are buried. My father Isaac and his father Abraham, that you will bury me where they were buried. So Joseph agrees, and then it says, then Israel bowed down at the head of his bed, assuming he's praying and preparing himself for entering into eternity. So that is Genesis chapter 47.